actually. I thought I'd use a headset, but I'll just run with the handheld, Delbert. And this is one. So I have 5 pages of notes, and I have the audacity to think that we're going to get through this. So I'm going to try to talk quick, I guess, but we'll see how this goes. We're excited to share our story, and also a little scared. I am excited to share our story, or you know. I appreciated the songs that were selected. Be the Center actually kind of resonated with that one. That's really kind of been even though I haven't always done a good job of acting like it, but that's really, in my heart of hearts, been a passion of mine. Probably something that would be close to representing, my desire through life. So I want to try to share this story from and include 3 different aspects. You can tell a story and it's historical, like just, a telling of the facts, but also to tell about a bit of our emotional and our spiritual. So kind of historical, emotional, and spiritual experiences, kind of what, hopefully at the end of this, you'll get a bit of an idea what has made, some of the questions you really wondered, what in the world, it'll make more sense now of why I am the way I am. So here's the moment. This is, hopefully here in the next hour, you'll find some answers to your questions. And you'll also have a tremendous respect for my wife for having stayed with me all this time. So I'll start with myself. I was born in Maryland, actually, just south of the Mason-Dixon line. So that's my trump card when someone in the South calls me a Yankee. I was actually born south of the Mason-Dixon, which was the line between the Yankees and the Confederates. But when I was about 5 or 6, we moved to Pennsylvania. It was about an hour north, 45 minutes north or so. South central PA, it was York County, which is right beside Lancaster County, which is where all the Amish are, over there on the other side of the Susquehanna River. And I need to be careful, I don't strike you. So I more or less grew up in Pennsylvania. I was homeschooled for the first year and then went to a Christian day school for the rest of my school years. My dad was a school teacher as long as I was in school, and actually he taught school at that Christian day school until all of my siblings graduated. Took a break for a while, but he went back to school teaching again. He's teaching now. Well, it's Sunday today, but you get the idea. And that was over in Lebanon County. So I went to school with that bunch. I went to school with the Lebanon, Lancaster County in that environment. So that's very familiar to me over there, but it didn't, there wasn't Amish where we lived. We didn't live there. We went to church a half an hour the other way, actually, at a small church. It was I want to say, I don't know what the attendance would have been, maybe probably ranged between 40 and 80 through the years, as far as the people that showed up on a Sunday morning. Probably pushed 100, maybe 120 towards the end there. So it was a small, I grew up in a small church environment. I'm the oldest of 4 sisters. The 4 sisters, the youngest 2 were twins. So I grew up with a lot of sisters, and we kind of have almost like 2 families in a sense. I'm probably the only one of the family that says that, but when I was 19, you'll hear in the story, when I was 19 is kind of when I left home, as it were. And so my next youngest sister was 17, so she was already in the teen years, but then the twins were maybe 10 or 11 at that time or something. So after I left home, that group of girls, they all kind of went through their whole adolescence drama thing, how all that goes. And I wasn't really there for that. So they kind of had their second family experience, maybe not second, but so now they're all married. 2 of them live in PA, 2 of them live out west, and they get back and forth, but I'm not necessarily overly close or involved with the rest of them, as it were. Not that we have issues, just kind of our lives. Anyway, I was raised in a Mennonite church. Delbert shared a little bit about what the Mennonite was. some historians, to add to what he contributes, some historians will attribute the concept of separation of church and state to the Mennonite movement. And that comes from it was like the 1400s or so. The Catholic Church had been the government, like the government and the Catholic Church were the same thing for 1,000 years through the Dark Ages. A couple of dudes figured out that they can read the Bible. It's not just supposed to be the priest that reads it in Latin, and they figured out that salvation was an experience we were supposed to have at adults, and you're supposed to be believers' baptism instead of this baptism as babies. So they started baptizing one another, and that was like the birth of the movement. Like, that was a brand new idea at the time, for the first time in 1,000 years. So that started a movement. The Catholic Church tried to exterminate them. They burned them at the stake. They cut their heads off. They persecuted them. Like, they literally tried to exterminate them. Thousands of people lost their lives out of the deal. But that's kind of where the Mennonite movement came from. And then that was kind of like in the German-Swiss area. Some of the Delbert's people went to Russia when they had the invitation to go live in peace and farm. But then the people that I grew up with went to Holland, or the Dutch area, and then from there came across the pond to the U.S. However, even though I was raised Mennonite, I actually was not born. My mom and dad, if you know anything about Mennonite, Polkinghorne is not a Mennonite name, like Martin and Miller and so on, Stolzfus and blah, blah. Polkinghorne is not one of them. So if you know those circles and hear my name, you're like, wow, it's not a Mennonite name. I was raised, so my mom and dad, they were not. They joined the Mennonite church after I was born, but I was just an infant. So that's growing up. That's all I knew for my growing up experience, that culture and that environment. However, all my aunts, uncles, and cousins and family, and on that side, were not. They were probably acknowledged God, but they weren't overly religious at all. And of course, my mom and dad weren't steeped in the culture either. So I kind of have a foot in both sides, as it were. In my experience, when I say I'm a Mennonite, I kind of am, but I'm not anymore. And anyway, and by the way, there's lots of different flavors of Mennonites. Today, there's actually Mennonites that they go by the name Mennonite, and they would embrace homosexuality in the church and even across the pulpit. That's okay. And then there's Mennonites that drive horse and buggy. So that's a really broad range. So there's any flavor of, just like any other religious sect, I guess, there's a broad range of varieties. Ours was on the conservative side. Think, if you're not familiar with them, think really conservative, primitive Baptist kind of a thing, wear dresses and women have long hair, or Church of God, where they really super conservative side of things. Our women wore dresses. They had to be a certain kind of a dress, a cape dress they called it. Their hair was up, and they wore a head covering, and it was, it was like any religion tends to be. It becomes quite practice-oriented and works-based somewhat, so, and you kind of lose the essence of the thing, but that's what it was. For a home life, and by the way, that small church I went to, I grew up there. I went there. That's the only church I knew from a little tyke until after I was married. So my church environment was pretty stable. My friend group there was pretty stable. Kind of had the same buddies all through that range of life. That didn't change. At school, I was kind of the outcast. I was actually kind of the kid that got picked on a lot at school for some reason. I guess it was this tall, lanky, skinny, redheaded, probably hot-tempered, I don't know, kid that was not from their culture. I was a Polkinghorne, and they were all Millers and Martins, and it's, anyway, so that was actually not a real happy, that environment was actually not a real happy space for me. But then where I went to church was a whole different set of friends, because that was like an hour and a half drive between those two places. So that was much more stable. Interestingly enough, once I became a youth, joined the youth group, then my social circle did include some of those that I went to school with, and after I was 16, 17, then I suddenly became popular. I'm not sure how that, with some of the very same people, not sure what that was, but I probably just figured out how to be somebody else or something, I don't know. My home life was slightly dysfunctional. It was probably, I would say it's probably average. I asked my wife on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being terribly dysfunctional, 1 being perfect, how dysfunctional. She thought it was a 5 or a 6. I chose a 4, so it probably averages at a 5. There was not physical abuse, but my parents were broken people too, and they didn't have a grasp on emotional wholeness themselves, and so naturally, they honestly, I know they did the best they could, and they did love us as best as they could. But at the same time, it wasn't always a real happy space. They had a lot on them. They had 4 kids. They had twin girls, and they had me. So it was, yeah, enough said, exactly. I do remember them, like there was no physical abuse. I know that they put a real effort forth. I remember taking family trips. I remember going on bike rides as a family. Like I know they did put legitimate, honest, heartfelt effort into creating our family environment. However, there was a lot of arguing. There's a lot of anger in our house. I remember my parents fighting, like not physically, but like the hollering kind of fighting. As a kid, I remember being concerned that maybe one of them was going to leave and might not see one of them again. And actually, I don't know, I was probably 10 or something, and I like intervened. Like they were in a fight, and I thought this was not going to end well, and I called the preachers. Have someone come in here and tried to make this go away. So apparently my mental, like I was, as this 10-year-old kid, I was pretty concerned. So there was that. I remember being told by one of my parents that they were ashamed that I was a part of the family, which I'd never been born into the family kind of thing. So like that kind of a dynamic, that was also there. And that kind of cherry picks some of the worst. So it wasn't like always that, but it was also not necessarily a happy place all the time. When I was 16, 17, I graduated. I was able to graduate a little bit early. I think I was 17-ish when I graduated. And my parents forced a career change on me. There was a local business owned by friends and of ours. Didn't go to the same church, but it was similar, and we were kind of close to them. It was a landscape supply business. Sold around there. Everybody manicures their lawns and have nice flower beds, and so mulch is like a really big thing. So they had a mulch. That was like the biggest part of their business. They made it and they sold it and they delivered it. And I worked there. My dad worked there in the summers when he wasn't teaching school. I enjoyed it. There was lots of equipment. You're moving bulk material, right? So big piles, big loaders, and then also skid steers, load trucks and loaders and trucks and delivery trucks and semis. Like that was a guy space to be in, right? So that was a fun, and I had every anticipation and expectation to work there when I got out of school. And when that time came, my parents informed me that they had arranged for me to work for someone from our church in the construction space, doing construction work. I remember being furious about that. I was pissed. That was an event, actually, because and actually the reason they were scared I was going to turn into a truck driver, actually, is why that they did that. So that was hard for me, but that was an event. So I spent actually a good number of years working for that guy. And that was a good experience. He had a cabinet shop, so we built cabinets. Like we got rough cut lumber, and we built raised panel doors from that. Like full kitchen rebuilds. We would build houses, and we'd like pour the footers, and we did the trim. So like, and the electrical, and the plumbing, and we did it residential, and we did commercial, and industrial. And so like till I left there, I had a opportunity to learn and experience an incredible range of trades and experiences and different things there. So it was a good experience, and I learned a lot. But there was that. I had accepted Christ as my Savior around the age of 11. It was kind of unremarkable. I remember kind of being miserable about all the bad things that I would do, just really dealing with guilt and all of that. And all of a sudden it was like, you know what, I could just accept salvation and be released to this. So I did. And so in that setting, you would go through instruction class, and then you were baptized into the church and all that. So I went through that. But that was the beginning of my faith, and it was probably fairly average. It was as deep as it could be, or probably could have actually been a lot deeper. But yeah, not a lot of extra comment there. By the time I was 19, and I am going to give my wife a chance to talk here, I'm getting closer. But by the time I was 19, I probably presented as a fairly average teen for my age. Me and my buddies, we would We were an adventuresome bunch. We'd go on like a week-long canoe trip kind of a thing up in New York, Saranac Lake area. You might know, yeah. Do like a 20-mile canoe trip with a bunch of portages in between. And we also had some buddies in Massachusetts. One of my buddies was a pilot, so we'd fly up to Massachusetts. They had a little strip, mind you, in their backyard. And we'd land right there in their backyard, spend the weekend, and fly back down to PA. So I had a good time. And that was, most all that happened before I was 19. So yeah, I was living life. I was active in church. I'd share devotionals when asked, lead songs and various things. I was frequently guest much older than I actually was. When I was 18 maybe, I was there with my siblings, and someone thought I was the dad. Like, it was like that. Usually at least about a 5 or 6 year miss on. No, maybe not that much. At least 3 or 4, but oftentimes much more than that. I was guessed older for some reason. I did not have a beard then. I don't know what it was. I would say emotionally, probably the inner child was still only like 5 or 6, though, because my mother was broken, my dad was broken, so they didn't really have to really reach that inner boy and nurture and grow him up. He was delayed in development at that point. I had developed porn and a purity problem. I was introduced to porn probably when I was 12 to 14, I'm going to say. So that was there by that time. Of course, I'd expected to defeat it by the time I'm 18, by the time I'm 20, by the time I'm married, what have you. But I was 19, and that was part of my life. But when I was 19, I did experience a life-changing, there was a big pivot there. I was asked to come and serve at a Christian discipleship center as a counselor. Probably would have better qualified as a resident, but they asked me to come and serve as a counselor. And that discipleship program, it was in a house, and the bedrooms were set up as dorms, sort of, and they're so in a counselor, like you lived with, you slept in the dorm with your residents. And those people came there. Oftentimes there was someone in life who they had some kind of family issue. They had an anger problem. They had a moral problem. They had maybe a legal problem. Sometimes people from the court system were referred there to come, and maybe their family or their local church just had exhausted their efforts, and so they needed a more intensive live-in program to try to overcome their issues, so they would come there. The idea of having 19, 20, 21-year-olds be the counselors in that environment seems ridiculous, but looking back, but I think it worked because the program, essentially, we were kind of the hands and feet of the program director. We were very, we had a lot of direction and input from the program director, and he was there every day. And so, but anyway, we said at the time that it was doing the work of a pastor without the preaching part, as far as like working with people's issues and so on. So I was plunged into that, and that really grew me up a lot. I was there involved in that program for about a year and a half, I would say. Most of my residents were older than my dad. But one of them was actually close to my age, and he also was an only brother. He had five sisters. So that was cool to be able to have him there in that space. I really did enjoy my time there. It was a very intense time. I had some very intense leadership development experiences there. Because you've got families that maybe they have a family business and the father has like really been abusive, so they're trying to figure out how to transfer ownership of this family business, and like there's heavy, weighty conversations. And actually, while I was there, the program director got stuck in Honduras, I think it was, because his wife had got diverticulitis in Honduras, and they had to have surgery down there, and it was right over the time where some of these big meetings were happening. So here I'm like 20 years old and directing some really weighty meetings. Like, looking back, it seems utterly ridiculous, but at the time when you're 20, you don't know better, and you have a uninformed sense of confidence, and there's not much other options to do, actually. Like, the show must go on. And so, yeah, there was some intense moments. I'm always well supported. there was a house parent there. I had other counselors there to support us, and so it wasn't like I was on an island, but that was an intense time. I really enjoyed I felt like I was making a difference and having impact in people's lives. And I actually, here shortly, on the tail end of being there, I actually went home with one of my residents to help with the transition process of reintegrating into his home life, which was in Colorado. And I saw this opportunity. Being there, you saw when you're helping people in a space like that, there's way more need than there is ability to serve, capacity to serve, right? And so me and my co-laborers there, counselors, like we saw that, and we saw that we were plugging into that. And I didn't want to get married because I knew that if I got married, I wasn't going to be able to have the freedom to plug into this need and give. I found it very fulfilling, and rightfully so, because we were doing good work. So yeah, I did not want to get married. I was going to be an Apostle Paul. Like that just made sense. That's what I wanted to do. I think pretty soon it's her turn. Oh, I still had the purity problem. That even through there, we had we were accountable to we had to fill out monthly or weekly accountability sheets to our program director, and among my other counselors, it was not a hidden thing. It was not a hidden sin in that sense. And me and my other co-counselors, most of us probably all had the same struggle, the same failures, and we tried hard. We had a hot sauce there that was I don't know what was in it, but it was bad stuff. And so every week we'd get together, we'd check in. If anybody had a failure, then we had to take a spoonful of this hot sauce. And it was so bad, the spoonful, it made you want to puke, looked like your face was going to explode. It felt like your face was it was bad. So I remember we tried that for a while. And I still remember one time one of my buddies there, one of the co-counselors, he's like, guys, this is not working. It's not helping. I think we should stop this. And we're like, yeah, that's right. It's not making any progress here. So that was, anyway, I just share that because that was still part of my journey at that point. Okay, I'll take a break and let my better half speak for a bit.
So we did, the other night we were doing some personality type quizzes, and one of the questions on there was something about being a public speaker, and the option was you enjoy it or you avoid it. And he's definitely the enjoy, and I'm the avoid. Anyway, so this is not an easy thing for me, but I'll do my best. I was born in El Dorado Springs, Missouri. I was the youngest of 6 children, 5 girls and 1 boy. He mentioned that earlier. Anyway, when I was 2 years old, my family moved to Summersville, Missouri, which is where I lived till I got married. It was a little hick town, very redneck, hillbilly country. I enjoyed it. We were the only Mennonite, so I grew up Mennonite also. I was much more integrated in Mennonite than he was because of the difference in our background. But it was the only Mennonite church right there. And the culture was kind of, we were the right ones, everybody else was lost. We were, anyway, very much a performance religious culture. But not as much as there is in PA. I will say that. I definitely feel the difference moving. Anyway, I was a happy-go-lucky child. My mom called me her sunshine girl. I was the youngest. I was the baby, so I was probably somewhat spoiled. I don't know. I was also a tomboy. I love sports, like doing things with the boys, had a lot of crushes. Let's see. I was going to say something.
I was one of them, actually.
Yeah, I don't know if I can count how many crushes I had, but anyway. I got saved when I was 10. I remember going to my mom, and yeah, she led me through that. I was sensitive, like, I was not the kind of person who wanted to go out and push all the lines and try all the things I could. I was more one, I was like staying in my comfort zone, or staying, doing things that were, well, I was a people pleaser also, so I didn't want to do the things that were looked down on because of that, partly also. I guess, yeah, with being in the Mennonite culture, it was definitely a culture of performance. Focused a lot on how a person dressed. Like, yeah, we had to have our dresses a certain length, the sleeves had to be a certain length, we had to have our head coverings a certain size, and just all very much of performance, outward performance. Let's see. Our home was somewhat dysfunctional. It had, since I was the youngest, I feel like it was a lot better with me growing up than it was for the older ones. But there was still some things that were not great. I had a good relationship with my mom. My dad was, I was very proud of him. I really liked him a lot, but he was more distant, not very involved. He was gone a lot. He was a car dealer, so he was gone a lot with going to car auctions. And when he was at home, then it seemed like he did also stock trading. And so when he was home, he was on the computer a lot, and that's still a hard thing for me if somebody's on a screen. I was the youngest, and so my two oldest sisters were 10 and 12 years older than me. They got married. The oldest one got married when I was 7, the next one when I was 10, so I don't remember a whole lot of them being home, but the next 4 of us were, we were all 18 months in between us, so the one that's the next under the 2 oldest, she's 5 years older than me, so we were all fairly close. So I remember, we have a lot of memories with them, and I had good relationship with my siblings. We were fairly, close. Not as much with my brother, but with my sisters especially. But yeah, my parents were also, I know they definitely did the best they could, but they were definitely not emotionally whole people. Their relationship was, I remember them arguing a lot. Yeah, Dad was also angry a lot, but let's see. We had a church school that only went to 8th grade, so I only went to 8th grade. I do have my GED, but only went to 8th grade. After school, I had 2 jobs. First, I worked for a family that had 6 children. 7 and under, so I really enjoyed children. That was a fun experience for me. They had twins also. And I always wanted to have a big family myself. But, God, I guess so, otherwise. I also worked at a meat shop after I worked for the family. So, yeah. Got the experience of a lot of dead animals and meat and all that. I know during my teens, I remember there were times when I was home a lot by myself because, well, my parents were there, but my siblings were either doing VS work or they went for counseling. All of them had the 3 older than me. So I remember being at home a lot by myself. I was very independent. I thought it was great. Well, I am an introvert by nature, so being at home, not having all my I enjoyed when they were there, but it didn't bother me when they weren't there either. It was, but there was a lot of focus, I guess, on the others because they seemed to all be having issues, and I seemed to be the one that was doing good, doing okay, and outwardly I was, but now I realize how much how little input there was given as a teenager and the effect it had on me, I guess. That's still, I guess, a part that God is working on healing now. Let's see. I think I'm ready for.
My turn again. So at some point, I got through the didn't want to get married thing. I don't remember that I met someone that I'm like, oh, you know what, I think I want to get married. I don't remember it being that. What I remember is that I came to the realization that if I did get married and I had children, I could multiply. And so this impact I was having on the kingdom, actually, I could multiply it instead of just burning out myself. So then it made sense. And I'm like, you know what, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I can do this thing. Maybe I had already had interest in her, and so I was needing to justify that. I don't know. I don't remember it being that way, although it's very probable. But I did have to convince my parents because this resident of mine who had all the sisters, we had, as counselors, we had to be on the line when they had their phone calls back home again, which like once a month or every other week or something. I forget how often that was. So the whole family would be on the phone, and I'm listening, not participating, but I have to monitor it. And that was just protocol that we had. And so he had two sisters at home still, and they were just constantly giggling. I think they were nervous because they knew there was this other guy on the line. And she was this giggling voice. But I did get to know her. So he had a friend get married in Ohio, and I had to chaperone him to Ohio, go with him because he's in the program. But he was able to go to the wedding, but I had to go with him. So then I got to meet the whole family and spend a weekend with the family, and that's when I met her, and that's when she met me. And
I didn't. When I shook his hand the first time, I didn't look him in the eye.
No, she could not look me in the eye, but she did look me in the eye yet that weekend. And then there was a second wedding that some months later, while he was still at the program in Colorado, that I wouldn't have had to come along, but he asked. At that point, he was far enough along in the program that he was able to go by himself, but he actually asked that I would come with him anyway. And so I did, and we flew to Missouri and then drove with him and his two sisters from Missouri to Colorado. So we road tripped 14 or 16-hour drive. And that's when you'll get to know someone if you coop yourself up in a car that long. So that was a good time. So by this time, I figured out I liked this little young lady, but I had to convince my parents. They didn't like the idea of me dating a daughter of one of my residents. They thought that sister. There we go. They thought that didn't feel right to them. They weren't okay with that, and I can partly understand that, I guess. So I actually decided, I purposed in my heart, it's like, well, I chose to like her, I'll choose to quit. Like, I was going to honor their desire for me not to pursue her. But it did not work. Like, it just did not work. So I met with my program director. I was like, hey, obviously he was a figure in my life. I'm like, I got this problem. I don't know what to do with it. He said, so in other words, I could easier convince you that my desk is an elephant than that she is not to be your wife. And I'm like, yeah. He said, well, it's been a while since I've taken your parents out to dinner. He said, maybe I should take them out to dinner. I'm like, okay. Wasn't really asking. I was just asking, what should I do? And he comes up with that. So, well, all right. So he did. And out of that, and by the way, in that culture, we didn't date, actually. It was courting. We called it dating, but if you were dating, it was courting. It was understood by both parties and everybody else that it was to the intent of figuring out if you wanted to marry one another. So it was taken pretty seriously. And in that context, then, of course, I'd run it by my parents and say, hey, I think I'm ready to pursue this thing. Can I get your blessing? And then if they did, then I would go to her parents, and I did, and say, hey, I'm interested in pursuing a relationship with your daughter. Is that okay with you? And they would give their blessing. And then I would talk to her and ask her if she was interested in developing a relationship with me. And so big conversations, right? But that's what that looked like. But after him going out, the program director going out with my parents, they went out to a Chinese restaurant. I think it's still there. Apparently the food was good. But they actually, after that, they said, well, I guess we can't say no. So the absence of a no was a yes for me. So I pursued this thing. As it turned out, there was another guy that was interested in her that her parents weren't comfortable with. So she was essentially handed me on a platter. I say, they're like, yeah, go for it. I didn't, she was the only person I asked. A lot of my friends have gone through, asking and being denied or rejected, and that was not the case for me. Yeah, what?
He was also the only person I ever dated, or
Sure.
the only one that ever asked me.
So anyway, so we started dating. I was still at Shepherd's Fold. I went to Colorado then after was dating through that transition period. I had a lot of fun there. I did some elk hunting there, archery elk, very close encounters. Like that was a lot of fun. I got started snowboarding there. I had a really good time in Colorado. Also was involved in this people helping mission there. But then we dated for 4 months till we got engaged, and then we were married 6 months later. So our courtship lasted 10 months. So at the 4-month mark, I'm still in Colorado. A friend of mine's getting married in Pennsylvania. I'm going to fly to Pennsylvania. She's flying to Pennsylvania. We're going to be together for the weekend, be at this wedding. It's going to be a fun time. I'm going to propose to her. Packed my bags, had the suitcases in the truck. My friend, someone was going to take me to the airport. But he had just bought a new-to-him motorcycle the evening before. I had actually gone with him. We picked this thing up. We got back late in the night. That morning, I'm fixing to fly out. But of course, he's got it unloaded, and I'm going to take it for a test drive quick before we leave. And I crashed it. I was met the pavement doing about 60 miles an hour, and no helmet. Very, very fortunate. But I landed in a ditch. My foot stuck straight. Like my leg was whole, but my foot now stuck straight out the side of that way instead of that way. And I thought, oh, that's going to be a keeper. And I lifted it up, and it just kind of came back and flopped straight again. So went to the hospital. The emergency room looked at it, and they said, we can't do much for you. You're going to need a specialist. So they packed it up and sent me home. And she didn't divert. She got a ticket. She flew to Colorado instead of Pennsylvania. Not sure why. That made me feel emotional. Anyway, so I was bunged up. I think they waited a week to operate. There was talk of having to fuse my ankle. Like, it was a fairly significant injury. Basically, I blew my ankle apart, and which I'm healed now. Like, praise the Lord for that. But so, did you spend a week, 2 weeks, week and a half?
2 weeks, I think.
2 weeks maybe there, while I was waiting to get my surgery, and then after I got my surgery. Amazingly enough, 6 weeks after that, we had another wedding. Her brother got married, and I was in the bridal party, and I was able to walk into do the ceremony without crutches, just with my boot, which I had my pant over it, so a lot of people didn't even know it. So I had an amazing recovery. Good surgeon, I guess. But so here I am that weekend, tore up, oozing fluids. Like, I got road rash all over myself, and my leg is not together. And I was going to propose, and I did not let that stop me. So there I am on a recliner in a living room, miserable, like bandaged up. I'm like, would you marry me? And she said yes. It's like the most unromantic thing, but it was us. So I don't know. There's that. That's how we got engaged. Yeah, it was good. So 6 months later, we got married. We had a long-distance relationship because she lived in Missouri, I lived in Pennsylvania and Colorado at the time, so it was a lot of phone dating. Long-distance relationships are different than local relationships because you don't see one another. So I think I actually think it accelerates your relationship because you spend time talking. We chose to talk once a week, so a lot of hours on the phone. And yeah, I feel like we built our relationship quickly and covered a lot of territory fast. My counselors at the Fold, there was a running joke that if you were a counselor, you probably were going to get ordained a minister at some time. And it was based actually, in fact, because a high percentage of those guys went on in life to wind up in ministry or as an ordained minister at some point later in life. So we agreed that we would ask our girlfriends that they would need to be okay with the prospect of potentially being a preacher's wife, like that they need to be. I think it was the first time I went to see you We dated for a month over the phone and went to see you then, and I went over that list, and that was one of those questions. So there was some gravity. There was gravity in our building of our relationship there. We got married. We did a crazy honeymoon. We went to Belize, flew into Placencia. Delbert knows where that is. The runway there. Placencia is too narrow for, it's a peninsula, too narrow for a runway, so it's like a jetty built out into the water that they land planes on. And we were there, and then we took a boat ride across the water, just a little outboard boat, and then caught a bus to further down into Belize to see a buddy of mine down there. And while we're there, we took a motorcycle trip and seen a river and a falls and a bridge and swam in a cave, and another motorcycle trip to Punta Gorda. And then we go up to PG and we get in a boat, another outboard boat, and go across saltwater, like part of the ocean, for an hour to Guatemala and catch a 6-8 hour bus ride to Guatemala City, where I had some other buddies and spent some time there, and took a bus to Antigua. And like, I don't even know how we did that, because we went to Guatemala. We didn't even speak the language, and we didn't even have the right kind of money, and we had nobody with us and no tour guide, but we got the money changed and we found the right bus, and anyway, it happened. So it was great. That was a trip. In Pennsylvania, I rented our house and bought our furniture for our house myself. She never saw it. We didn't have smartphones at the time, so she first saw our house in Pennsylvania when we got back from our honeymoon and drove back from Missouri. Need to keep cruising here. Running out of time. After we got married, for 4 months, we were in Pennsylvania. At 4 months, I was still working for the same boss. At 4 months, we got asked to go to Colorado temporarily to help with that same family business. It was a log home construction, manufacturing construction business, to help with for 4 months. So we went out there for 4 months, came back to Pennsylvania, again with the same employer, for 8 months. At the end of that 8 months, I quit for that employer. I had a crew of guys that I rounded up, and we went out to Colorado to help with some construction projects, some house building projects out there, and we were going to use that as a training experience and then come back to Pennsylvania and sell and construct log homes on the East Coast. So we wound up being then out there for 8 months with them. You can see we're bouncing back and forth quite a lot of moving and a lot of traveling. But we're out there for 8 months, and then I guess we figured out that wasn't going to work out for some reason, because we came back to Pennsylvania then after that for another 8 months, and I started working for that same business, actually, that I was turned away from when I was a teen. Went back there, we're living there, worked there for about 8 months, and then, the 8 month, one of those 8 months times, the 4 month time in Colorado, they asked us to move there to help with that business. And we prayed about it, and we felt that God directed that wasn't to move. We were to stay in Pennsylvania. Even though we did bounce back, but it wasn't. However, then when we're in Pennsylvania, they asked us that time again. The owner there was getting himself in a bad situation. He was upside down in debt. And he actually had a nervous breakdown, I believe, looking back on it. Asked if we would come out there. So we prayed about move out there to help him with this situation. We prayed about it. We used a fleece, actually. And the fleece was resoundingly go. And we actually didn't want to go. We actually wanted to stay in Pennsylvania. We had church. We had friends. It was comfortable. But it was clear to go. So we went. We actually lived in a camper. We bought a fifth wheel camper, and wound up living in it for two and a half years. Earlier in that bounce back stage, those times, one of those eighth month times in Colorado, Letitia was born in Colorado. So she then bounced with us to Pennsylvania and then moved back. Logan was born while we were there living in the camper in that 2.5 year period. And all of our births were home births, wherever we were at the time. Same midwife for both of those, actually, Eve, fortunately. But yeah, so I spent 2.5 years managing this man's business, and he kind of left. It was too much for him, and he needed to get away, I guess, and he just left. And there I was, and so I assumed management of that business. In that time, it was very intense. Because he was upside down in debt, we were constantly cash broke, constantly more bills than we could pay. A credit card defaulted and sued us through that time. I was able to negotiate with them to prevent that from collapsing the whole thing. Vendors, like placing liens on projects that he had done that he hadn't paid a vendor bill on. Like, I was plunged into a tremendous amount of stress through that time. And still, like, we had dealers in the Midwest that we sold log home kits through, and then we had local projects going, like 3 and 4, I think up to 5 housing projects like going up simultaneously there locally in Colorado, and I was like at the steering wheel. So it was very intense. Eventually, it didn't work out. Eventually, sales hiccuped, and I knew we were going to get there, and I had already kind of rang the bell of warning to the owner. I said, hey, look, you're not here, but you just do need to know that this thing could collapse. Like, the deal was if I could save it, I would be able to they would give me the business. And I was like, well, I'll try. So I tried for 2.5 years. We made progress on the debt, like we were going in the right direction, but finally sales hiccuped. And I told him, I was like, we're here. We're going to have a problem this winter. This job, we just lost this job, and it's going to be a problem. He wound up actually blaming me for the situation, believe it or not. I think he had left and he kind of like just lived in denial that it was what it was and thought it was going to go away. But then all of a sudden it was my fault. So I had 2 weeks to vacate. We had to move because we were living there, and I had to leave. So I lost my job. We had to move, and then actually also simultaneously, through that time, I'm seeing my notes here. Through that time, it was a good time. It's like working in the Colorado Rockies, building houses, like some of the scenery, some of the experiences, some of the places. It was fantastic as far as that goes. Snowboarded a lot in the wintertime. That was kind of an escape. We had purpose and clarity while we were there because God had clearly directed us to go there. So we never questioned that we should or should not be there. We had a lot of peace in that, but it was very intense. So then at the end of that chapter, that closed because he flushed us out. We had to move, and my wife's health crashed. It kind of started to crack a little. I had a side business as well. I had a trucking company that I kind of started on my own, had a driver. I kind of managed that on the side as a hobby, I guess, because I needed more things to do. So then my wife's health crashed, and I lost the job. We had to move. God was very good. I remember the meeting in my office where he told me that he wanted me gone in 2 weeks, and I had to move. And there was a gentleman at church that had a concrete pumping business, and I knew he had an opening. So I called. He walked out. My the owner walked out. My boss walked out, and I called him. I said, "Hey, this just happened. Is that opening still available?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "And I need a place to live." He's like, "Well, I got an apartment in my shop." So literally in one phone call, I had a place to live and another job. But my wife's health crashed there. It was one of those situations where you go through all the tests and they can't find anything wrong with her, but she got to the point where you butt in here wherever you're ready. Where she was, I'll stop at the Mr. Mom part, but where she was pretty much, there was a period of time actually where she couldn't get out of bed, basically. So I was Mr. Mom. It was through the winter, so concrete pumping was slow, so I was home anyway. The local church was bringing in meals. There was a period of time, a few weeks maybe, I literally wasn't sure if she was gonna stay around or not because her health was just going down and down and down, and got to the point where she couldn't even really get out of bed, and she wasn't getting any better, and we couldn't figure out what the problem was. And if that continued, she was not going to make it. So that was a very intense time. We had 2 little children that were 1 and 3 at that point.
That was a hard time, but God was definitely there with us. I remember sometime before that I heard a voice, which I thought it was God at that point. Now I know it wasn't, that said, "You're going to die." And I know that created tremendous fear in me because of my family that I would leave behind. So I know that because I believed that lie, that had an effect on my health. But I was also very much of the type, I stuffed my emotions a lot, and so I had a lot of stuff just stuck inside, and I know that contributed to my health crashing. I was also, I didn't know who I was. Um, he was very much of a go-getter. I'm more of a laid-back person, but I was trying to keep up with him. Thought that that's what being a wife, what being a submissive wife was, to keep up with my husband and think like he thought and do what he did. Now I know differently, but so I felt like there was just a lot of things that really played into my health crashing, but yeah, I was very sick. Doctors couldn't help me. Yeah, I don't know. It was a hard time. But I went home. We went home, and I guess as I was laying in my bed, I started researching stuff. I started taking some for multi-level company health that sold some for health stuff that I felt like was really an answer at that point. Like, it helped get me out of the really serious place. I also went on, I don't know, I just did a lot of research and started finding some answers, changed my diet. And till I'm trying to think, yeah. I slowly got better anyway. I'll stop with that.
I'll try to crunch this together here. That recovery process probably took 5 or 6 years till you really got back to where you wanted to be as far as being able, that was your prayer, to be able to be well enough to be a wife and a mother. And it probably took 5 or 6 years till you really got there. 3 or 4 anyway, would you say? So I had changed the job, and that job wound up taking me to North Dakota. And that turned into us moving to North Dakota. We saw that our chapter in life closed in Colorado. The opportunity came to move to North Dakota, and that time we didn't need a fleece. We prayed about it. We were kind of comfortable again where we're at. We didn't but we felt like it was what the Lord had for us. So we said, okay, we'll go. Again, kind of a little bit reluctantly, but at the same time with peace. Moved to Colorado with the job, pumping concrete. Moved to North Dakota. We thought that was going to be a temporary time of financial blessing, because it was a good paying, it was good compensation doing that. Very, very busy. I worked way too many hours. It was normal that I would hit overtime Wednesday around noon, maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and rarely did over 100 hours a week, but like 80 to 90 was the norm. And did that for a long time, actually. Like, it was very unhealthy. It would sometimes go 3 days and I wouldn't see my kids. Like, I'd get home at 12:30, 11:30, they're already in bed, and I had to leave at like 3 in the morning to go start the next job. And so naturally your kids are in bed right then. So sometimes I would actually sleep at the shop, because I knew if it was only a certain amount of time, I'd be better off if I just slept there in the car. So I did that for a couple of years. And then, we thought it was going to be temporary in North Dakota because there wasn't a church there that we were comfortable raising our family in. But what we didn't realize is there was actually a church split teeing up, and that happened 6 months after we got there. And we founded a new group, a new church, and we participated in that. And I was actually ordained elder, or pastor elder of the group. Then we were like, North Dakota actually is going to be long-term. Like, I expected to raise our family there. We wound up buying property. We lived in a very small town, 6 square blocks, about 300 people. Everybody knew one another. We had property out of town where we intended to build a house. We built a shop there. I started building mini barns, quit the job, and started building mini barns. That was a good time. I have notes in here. My porn and moral problem, like, I still had that through this whole storyline here. I'm still dealing with that. I still haven't conquered that yet. That's starting to stress our marriage, or at times anyway, especially in Colorado, that it damaged our marriage there. North Dakota, not quite as much. I became an EMT, worked in the local ambulance service part-time. I could do that because I lived right in town and still do my own business. But then there was a sister in our church that got sick, real similar actually what Julie had an experience with. And someone raised the question, maybe this is more than just physical, maybe it's spiritual. We reached out to a place called Straight Paths Ministries to help with us with that. It was a deliverance ministry, essentially. They sent someone out who stayed in our house. And he told us about a program that they do to train you to help other people. And we're like, from my background, having been a counselor, I'm like, yeah, that. I want to learn. I want that. But first of all, you had to go to a seminar that they do before you can go to this training. So we went to the seminar, Land of Promise seminar, and it turned our lives upside down. It was essentially a deliverance ministry, taught you spiritual realities. My religious Mennonite background did not teach me that. And I look there as I had an encounter with the Holy Spirit. I feel like I received the baptism of the Holy Spirit there as a culmination of that. I was able to understand some of my bondages that I had carried up to that point, and was able to, that was a turning point. Right there was a turning point. I wasn't perfect after that, but that was a turning point in that to like where I'm at in the freedom that I have now. That moment, that experience was a turning point. We experienced personal healing there. I remember our children would have, we didn't watch movies, but they would have terrible nightmares. They would wake up and they'd tell us about this nightmare. Bad guy came in the house, cut family members up in pieces, put them in trash bags, and carried, like, it was very graphic. I don't even know where they got that from. Like, we didn't watch movies, but they had terrible nightmares. And they, after we went to that seminar, did some spiritual business, cut off things and cast things out, and it was and took care of that. It wasn't emotional based, but it was very spiritually focused, and it was needed. We needed it at that time, and those nightmares, they stopped. Or if they did happen, the bad guy couldn't come in the house anymore. And there was some physical healing that we experienced there. So that was a real turning point. That we look back to that changed our lives. Scripture became alive. I remember the whole 20-hour drive home after that. It was like, wow, connecting scriptures, like it was crazy. We got home to North Dakota. Initially, our church family supported this experience. And in fact, I remember my co-elder, he said, we can now connect like we have it. Like, he had already had some of an experience like that himself. And so he's like, we're on the same page now that in a way we haven't been before. But that changed, actually. Something changed, something came in, and they then said that Julie, there's no way that Julie we shared our testimony of what happened. They said, there's no way Julie could have been saved before then. And it became a very caustic situation to where I would have had to basically deny the life of Christ in my wife from that point past. And they questioned my salvation, actually, whether I had been saved before then. And I would have had to renounce everything to do with that ministry. So I realized it was a very hard time. That was a very intense time, actually. 2 of my sisters had married into the family that we were doing church with. So I had brother-in-laws that were coming against me. Like, it was a really intense time. But God was good. And yeah, so we again saw that a chapter was closing. My business was Mini Barns. Sales had dropped off. I needed to do a transition there. But this was also happening at church, and I stepped down there, and we saw that God had we recognized the chapter was changing again. We've been here before, as it were. We had gotten to know Tim and Kate Yanion. Kate is here. Tim has since passed. But we got to know them at this training event. And there was a James Yoder that told us that, hey, Tim and Kate might have a job opportunity for you in Tennessee. I had been getting involved in a lot of ministry work at the time. Tennessee was central, so it was easy for traveling. It felt like the right thing. We made a trip. We felt it out here. Felt like the right thing to do. Rented an apartment from Rob Yanion. Got a job at Country Barn for a year. I worked there. But that was what got us from North Dakota to Tennessee. And we've been here ever since. Julie was pregnant when we moved from North Dakota to here. Mackenzie was born here in Tennessee. And we've had a miscarriage since then, so that was an event that we experienced. I'll go into this story yet. I had, over that time, I'd got involved in a lot of ministry work, speaking engagements, traveling, teaching. I thought that God was taking me out of business and moving me into ministry potentially full time. We did then, I was then eventually asked to be the pastor to lead the group there that we were doing church with, Faith Christian Fellowship, we called it. Delbert shared how I felt God directed me to close that down. That was a hard, kind of scary thing, but it was the right thing to do. But then that plunged me into a dark night of the soul, because at that point, ministry opportunities I had not sought them. They had just came to me, but then they also were not coming to me anymore. I had to close that down. I thought I was going to do a business in Colorado, and that stopped. I thought we were going to live in North Dakota, and that's so many things in my life there was a lot of disappointments. And that one, I didn't see it coming, but after that disappointment, I plunged into a dark night of the soul for about a year. That was really dark. I was going to share about that, but I'm kind of out of time. I guess if you want to hear about that, you come ask me. You better get ready to slip in anything important, because I think we're about out of time here. But about the time I was coming out of that and ready to start attending a church again, we started coming here, which was 2 or 3 Sundays before that event happened here that we talked about at our last sharing or connection meeting. So that was interesting timing. We had some, it was a bumpy ride here. We had some challenges here and some but God has been good, and yeah, we're here now. What more do we need to add here before we... Do you have anything that you want to add before we wrap it up? Your belly's still fine? So, man, I know it does kind of feel that way. I feel like we burned too much time to begin with. So, for work, I'll add this in. I worked for Country Barn for a year. Then I plan to go do my own thing. Delbert asked me, he heard of that, and he asked me to come help him build his business over there. It felt like the right thing to do, so I made that transition then. I wound up being there 6 years. And the last 3, I was able to help him in his journey where he was able to get away from it, and I managed it for him. That was actually very similar. I felt comfortable doing that because I'd done that before in Colorado. This was a much better situation. So I was able to help him with that. Now, since then, I have pivoted from that, and I'm looking to build my own equipment rental business. I do recognize, though, that some of the traumas that I experienced in Colorado with that business pressure affects me today, like that fear of running out of money and getting stuck. That's something that I personally have to process. I was going to share some. I'll share some about the dark night of the soul. I didn't. Well, I thought I was. I still don't exactly understand what happened in that year. My wife thought for a little while she was married to an atheist husband. It was dark. It was really dark. I was operating with the equivalent of a migraine emotionally. I was just, I don't know, I was lost for a little while there. I still believe there was a God, but I was really, I couldn't say that God is good. God didn't feel to me like God was good at that time. And I guess it was, if you read about what a dark night is, you'll it is a thing, actually. And that was that for me. And I guess I thank the Lord for coming out, for bringing me through that and bringing me here. And I've been able to build some very meaningful relationships here with the people that are here. And so I'm very thankful for that. Thankful for each one of you that are here. You sure you don't have... Yeah, well, go ahead. I'll recollect myself.
Okay, so over the time when we were at Faith, I remember we were just doing a lot of ministry work, and it was just came to a point where it was very overwhelming.
For context, I counted one year, there was 30 work days that I was off of work. Like, this isn't weekends, this is work days. It was a whole month I was off traveling for ministry work. I was involved with a seminar that we would do. We actually were asked to do that with some people I got connected with. We got asked to take that seminar to Africa. I had the opportunity to travel to Liberia and do it over there. Speaking in engagements, yeah. So that was a strain, that was a weight, but that was part of our life there for a bit.
So yeah, I remember getting to a place where I told him I just couldn't do it anymore because I felt like I was drowning. I also felt like I was a baby trying to do work of a soldier. And emotionally, yeah, I was not okay. So he kind of, that time of being in leadership at Faith, I was not very supportive, I guess, simply because I didn't have the capacity. But God did start doing a work in my heart. I started having some emotional healing over that time, during that time. But our family, sad to say, was somewhat neglected with my performance, people-pleasing mindset that, yeah, my children did get neglected some, and that I don't like. But after we moved to the place where we are now and we stopped going to church, that was actually a breath of fresh air because I felt like I could finally start to breathe and heal. Yeah, God took me on a journey of emotional healing, going back to before I was born, even of my parent. When my mom was pregnant with me, they had only had one boy, so they were hoping for another boy, and so God showed me that was still affecting me in some ways at that point. Yeah, and just different things as I was growing up, he took me to those places. Started working with a counselor, therapist, mentor, whatever you want to call her. That was really good. She showed me a lot of what it meant to be emotionally whole, walked with me through that. I've since worked with a different one also, so I've worked with 2 different ladies who have really helped me a lot. Yeah, it was a very hard time when James was in his dark night, but I felt like God used it to break an emotional dependency. I was very codependent. I had a very unhealthy codependence on him. And God actually gave me a picture in that time of taking a cord, think of a three-cord, I can't even say, 3-strand cord, whatever. Anyway, something that was attached to James that was supposed to be attached to God, and God showed me that he was taking it off of James and attaching it to himself. Yeah, our marriage we had hard times in that time also. But during that time, Jesus started coming to me in a very real way. He would just come be with me. And he started speaking into the lies that I had believed. And he was always just so delighted
He just had a look of delight and joy every time he came to spend time with me. I have to think of the woman at the well, how Jesus went to her. And that's how Jesus was for me. He came to me. Um, yeah, the miscarriage was our little baby, Everly. That was definitely a grief process to process through. But it was a good process. But yeah, that year was also a hard year. Otherwise, I felt like actually mentally and with my nervous system, something broke that year. So since then, I've been learning, continuing to learn about emotional health, but also mental health and regulating my nervous system, which is a whole another aspect also. So yeah, God has been very good and very gentle with me. I'm a slow processor. I guess I just marvel at his goodness and how he's taken every aspect, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, in the time and space when I could handle it. He brought those things to me to be healed, and he's not done yet. I used to be a person who thought I had it put together, but now I realize how broken I was and how much I needed Jesus.
Two things I'll add real quick. When we moved from North Dakota to Tennessee, I had an encounter with God, and God revealed to me I had a mother wounding, and God ministered to that, and that's been a journey of mine since then, part of my healing process. And then also after we moved here to Tennessee, there was a small group in Western Tennessee that we got involved with for a while that God was moving and doing things with, and that really kind of formed our perspective, or that was a formative experience of ours. That was a meeting where we would get together with 2-3 other families, and God would just show up, and it was like worship, and it was revelation, and it was words of prophecy, and it was words of teaching, and there were healings, and like those meetings would go till like 4 a.m, and we couldn't stop them, and it was this really intense, very powerful move of God that God did there for a while. So that was something we experienced that was formative. Jumping back here to like my dark night of the soul and her emotional and spiritual healing process here in the last 3 and 4 years or so, I think I'm seeing that a lot of our life has been a real roller coaster ride. Like we've been all over the place, done a lot of different things, been through a lot of different situations and experiences, and like here in the last 4 years probably, like a lot of those have kind of like coalesced and kind of maybe all came together in a way to where we're able to mix our experiences, mix our knowledge, mix our experience healing, connecting, I don't know, like really kind of crystallize maybe who we are. I would say kind of who we are has really kind of crystallized and kind of almost like blossomed or bloomed, or the bud opened in the last 3 or 4 years from all of our formative experiences, and then all of our knowledge we've learned, and healing and insight and God experiences and all that have kind of really coalesced and crystallized in the last 3 or 4 years, I would say. And so now I say I'm a 40-year-old that identifies as a 28-year-old that intends to feel like a 45-year-old when I'm 85. I have a goal to snowboard with my son when I'm 85. There's a local guy here that lives in the Belvedere or the Winchester area that's 85, and he's a snowboard instructor. And I'm like, if he can do it, I can do it. So that's what I'm going for. We believe that the kingdom is here to fill the earth with its presence and influence, and we're participating and contributing for that, and raising our family for that. Family is very important to me, and not just our own blood family, but also church family is very important to us. So I think we'll leave it at that. We had a song. Did you have anything to say? Julie felt inspired to have this song played after we were done sharing. I don't think I have anything further to say. And then after that song plays, whoever is to close, Wes or whoever it is, can go ahead and close. If you have any lingering questions, we're an open book. Don't hesitate to come ask us.
Grant me serenity to accept things, the things I cannot change. Grant me the courage, Lord, to change what I can, wisdom to know the difference. In my weakness you can shine, in your strength I can fly. And you make everything, everything beautiful. You make everything, everything new. You make everything, everything beautiful. In its time, in your time, it's beautiful. Grant me serenity, Lord, and patience, for things will take time. Grant me freedom to walk a new path, and let me feel your love. Ooh, in my weakness you can shine, in your strength I can fly. And you make everything, everything beautiful. You make everything, everything new. You make everything, everything beautiful. In its time, in your time, it's beautiful. Lifting up in hands to you, my Savior, purify my soul. Knowing you redeem my pain and failure, purify my soul, beautify my soul. And you make everything, everything beautiful. You make everything, everything new. You make everything, everything beautiful. In its time, in your time, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. In its time, in your time, it's beautiful.